The stock market is not looking too good. Gas prices are hitting new highs. The US is already beginning to experience shortages, news outlets are warning of a severe recession in the near future, and Sleepy Joe fell down the stairs yet again. The United States may be in for a very rough time very soon. Some have even begun speculating that the US will soon face not merely a recession but a Great Depression, and one perhaps even more severe than the last. We live in a very different environment from that of the 1930s. The US is deeply in debt. Millions of Americans are dependent upon government and social programs that may not be able to endure the pressures of a depression. Social cohesion is far more eroded than it had been in the past. Common essential jobs in agriculture and industry are far scarcer today than they were back then. Families and individuals require more income in the present day to make ends meet. And perhaps worse yet, several countries and entities around the world are dependent upon the American superpower in a way no major country had been in the past. A crash of the US economy would have global economic repercussions as well as shift the geopolitical playing field, and the US is not the only country facing these issues, though much as in the past, the US is likely to be one of the most severely impacted. In this video, we will not be discussing if and why a recession or depression might happen, though do let us know if you'd be interested in seeing that in the comments below. Today's video will instead focus on how people survived during the Great Depression and what you can do to start preparing yourself. Now before we go any further, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Established Titles. Do you ever think about those movies where some of the characters seem to have fancy and noble titles like Esquire, Lord, or Baron? Want to know how you can get in on some of that action without having to become a lawyer or knight? Well then, Established Titles is the solution for you. Established Titles plays on an old Scottish tradition in which landlords are granted the titles of Lord or Lady. What Established Titles does specifically is allow you to purchase a small 1 foot by 1 foot souvenir plot of land in Scotland so that you can officially use these formal titles of Lord and Lady on plane tickets, credit cards, and wherever else may apply. Each purchase is also matched by the planting of a tree, so rest assured that your money is going to a good cause. You'll also get one of these sweet certificates to showcase your title in your office or living room. These certificates make for good last-minute gifts, and with Father's Day right around the corner, you don't want to miss out on this opportunity. Established Titles is hosting a sale for Father's Day that'll save you 10% when you use promo code MONSTER at checkout. Follow the link in the description to take advantage of this offer while it lasts. Now, back to the video. If you haven't already watched this video on how severe the Great Depression actually was, I highly recommend checking that out, but just to give you a quick summary, unemployment during the Great Depression was roughly twice as severe as it had been during the height of the COVID pandemic, reaching a peak of about 25%, and the duration of unemployment lasting several years. The worst states to live in were those that were highly dependent upon industry and trade. Pennsylvania and New York were among the most severely affected states, with not enough jobs to provide for their large populations. Another factor which contributed to harsh living conditions was a lack of agriculture. The more barren states of the West and the otherwise bountiful plain states impacted by the Dust Bowl also experienced severe unemployment and scarcity. Conditions remained most stable in the agricultural Southeast and the eastern Missouri River Basin. However, living conditions in these states were already lower than in other areas simply due to a lack of development. That didn't trouble the local populations too much, however it did mean that migrants to these states from other parts of the country would be trading one hardship for another. If you find yourself caught in an economic depression, you'll ideally want to settle down in a community capable of sustaining itself via local agriculture. These areas may have less access to manufactured goods during an economic crisis, but they will be able to keep you in a steady supply of food, so at the very least you won't go hungry. You might also have heard that growing your own crops in the city, be it in your apartment or on a rooftop, is a good option, but you simply won't be able to grow enough crops inside of an apartment for it to make a noticeable difference. At best, you'll be saving a trip or two to the store, but that's just about it. Growing crops on a rooftop during a time of crisis in a high-population city where social cohesion is a lot lower than in rural areas is just begging for plundering. Desperate people will steal your crops if you leave them exposed like that. Cities could implement programs that encourage all apartments to build their own rooftop gardens, and that would reduce incidents of theft, but even still you'll have those who just don't have enough and who will be desperate enough to steal from others. This is where personal defense comes in. There was a far greater degree of moral and social cohesion back in the 30s than in modern day. A new Great Depression is likely to be far more violent and crime-ridden than the depression of the past. You'll want to be able to defend yourself and your property, and one of the best things you can do is to build relationships with members of your own community in an attempt to establish that sense of trust and cooperation that may be absent. Now, if you're anywhere in your mid-20s to early 30s and have a good work history, chances are you'll be able to find work relatively easily. And I stress relatively because jobs will still be hard to come by, but as jobs become scarcer, being too young may be a reflection of inexperience, while being too old may be reflective of unreliability or being less energetic, or even being too experienced and thus being a threat to the supervisor who hired you. During the Great Depression, there was an ideal age group for employers, and although jobs have changed since then, harder times will force employers to be more selective with who they hire, so having a good resume, a useful skill set, and some reliable credentials are a must if you're going to compete with several others for the same job. You'll also want to lock in a full-time job if you can, and if you've proven to be a reliable worker, this is something you might negotiate later down the line, but expect that most jobs will cut hours and pay in an attempt to make ends meet. Skills in general are something you'll want to develop, especially in the fields of repair, cooking, baking, gardening, foraging, hunting, even basic sewing. The economy might crash, but you still have a life to live and need to keep up appearances. People in the Great Depression knew this and took great efforts to ensure they didn't look poor in public. Clothes were kept clean and tears were patched up or sewn in an effort to maintain normality, because nothing would get better if everyone just gave up on fixing the situation they were in. In regards to jobs, you're going to want to make sure the role you play is essential. Ask yourself, does the economy and community firmly rely upon the work my job provides? If the answer is no, then you might find your place of employment going out of business as fewer people can afford it. If you can confidently answer yes, then consider whether or not your position in the business is essential or if you're easily replaceable. If the latter, you'd better work extra hard to keep that job. Specialists and professionals like doctors, engineers, managers, and the like will be the most secure in their jobs, specifically because not just anyone can provide the essential service that they specialize in. However, you can still expect a reduction to your hours, income, and overall business in any of these fields as demands decline in a depressed economy. Now, of course, is preparing an emergency fund, preferably in something which is inflation resistant like gold, but make sure you know where you can trade that gold in for cash if and when you need it. Stock up on non-perishable food and supplies while you can, because rest assured there will be panic buying followed by a massive rise in prices. You want to stock up while supplies are readily available and still affordable. Aim for products that have a shelf life of at least a year and that can provide you with a good amount of nutrition instead of just empty calories. If you have a big freezer, stocking up on meat is probably a good direction to go, since meat prices are expected to be one of the most significantly impacted by an economic crisis. In short, move to where food is easily growable, build trust with your neighbors, learn some basic skills, evaluate the stability of your job, be a valuable worker, and have an emergency stockpile to fall back on. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe for more and hit the like button. Mr. Z, out.